Hi, my name is Pascal. I'm a video editor since I'm a little kid, so for a while now. And my first lesson to that video is to cut all the blah 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 that people just don't care about. Do you care about my childhood? No, you're here to squeeze me like a lemon to get all my knowledge that I'm about to share for free. There is no sponsor to that video. I don't do that kind of things. Will I ask you to subscribe? Well, surely not right now. I didn't give you anything yet. Why would you do such a thing? I did chapter that video if I ever talk about something you don't care about and you want to skip to the next part. So always remember that first lesson when you do your video editing. Be concise and don't make people lose their time. So let's jump into it. Chapter number 1. Purchase, Final Cut, and what is motion and compressor. So the first thing you need to do is to purchase Final Cut Pro in the App Store. But by doing so, you might see some other applications. So let's talk about them. The first one is Final Cut. That's the video editing software. If you're looking for software in which you can do some cuts, add titles, effect, transition, that's the one you're looking for. The second one is Motion. It works in the background of Final Cut, but it can also be used as a standalone software. It's a bit like the After Effects of Adobe Premiere. The third one is Compressor. It also runs in the background of Final Cut, but can also be used as a standalone software. This one is here for you if you have very specific needs when compressing your video. Note that if you're unsure about purchasing Final Cut Pro, there's a 90-day free trial that I will link in the description. So now that you get the software, we can jump to Chapter 2. Create a library. Well, that's the first thing you want to do when you open Final Cut before starting a new project. It's good to have one library for every single project you have. Let's jump on my computer for an example. So here we are inside Final Cut. What you are seeing just right now is the video that you're looking at that I'm editing. But if we go on the upper left corner, you can see that all of those logos are for libraries. Actually, I'm in this one, How to 2023. That's all the project I made on this channel since January 1st. So all of those things we see right here with numbers are the project I made. Just under that, we can see right now all the clips, pictures, audio that I needed to import inside that library to create those projects. There is some other things inside project. If I hit that arrow, we could see some other things. There's not much to see inside that one, but if I go, for example, on that one, this is a customer I have. So I create a library for that customer, and every time you come and see me, I create a new event. So those are event, and when I need to import new stuff for that new event, I put it inside those event instead of the library, so not all the things get messed up. When I go for a bigger project where I need to import a lot of files for a single things, like for example this one, this is a project I made about ice climbing, so there's a lot of media for only one video. I create a library just for that project. So basically a library is those things that we can see just right here that contain everything, the media and your project and your event. Not only it's your save file, but it's also a kind of a way to be organized. So now what you will need to do to create that famous library is to come up here on File, New, and Library. So like this. Now, if you don't have a very huge and very fast internal SSD on your computer, I highly recommend to set it on an external one. I personally use this Glyph of 4 terabyte that is connected over USB-C, and that is very fast. And that does a very great job for me. Then give it a name, choose where you want to save it, and hit save. Remember my first lesson? Don't make people waste their time. Actually, I really want to talk to you about video editing drives, but that's not the main subject of that video. This is why I left in the description a bunch of links to other video of subject related to that one. So if you need advice about video editing drive, take a look at the video number 1 in the description. So let's go back to our new library. Set the import settings to leave files in place. If you don't do that, Final Cut will make a copy of every single video you use in your project to the library. This means that if you're working on a project with 500 gigabytes of video files, this will take at least 1 terabyte on your hard drive just because of the duplicates. The advantage of duplicating everything to the library is that you will never lose the link to a file because everything is in the library. But the cost is huge. By leaving file in place, the only thing that Final Cut will remember to re-find your file is the name of the file and its location on the disk. This is why it's very important when you work as leave file in place to never ever rename or relocate a file to another folder. You might end up with missing a file by doing so. Well, it's not the end of the world. If you lose track of a file, you can still relink it, and most of the time, if Final Cut is on while you rename or move a file, it will keep track of it most of the time. But it's just good to get used to not move or rename your file. And yes, this requires you to be well organized before starting your project. Next point, disable background render. And this is to avoid having very huge useless files. I first need to explain what is a render. Basically, when you import a video, well, it's just a video, so Final Cut can read it like any other player on your computer. But when you start adding a title, a zoom in, a color correction, oh, another title, well, those are all things that Final Cut need to generate in real time. What you're seeing just right now is only a video, but while I was doing the video editing, that was all things that need to be generated. And this is hard on your computer. This is why as soon as you had an effect on a clip, you will see those white dots over the clip. The white dots mean that this part of the timeline will be generated in real time when you play it. If it's a basic effect, just like this title, that should be alright. It may, however, require a bit more power if it's animated. But if you put a lot of stuff, well, that you should render it. The render will basically only create a video file of your clip and effect so that Final Cut can read it very easily. But the thing with the render is that it will take a lot of space on your disk. This is why I disable background render. Otherwise, as soon as you modify something, it will create a new render file right away. So, you might end up with 20 render files for a single portion of a video, just because you work onto it and modify a lot of things in the process. When you disable background render, you just need to select the part you want to render and hit Ctrl R, R like render, to start the render. That you will see progress on the upper left corner. But still, when you know how to get rid of it, it's not a problem. Well, let's see how to do it. In fact, I can show you how to delete it if you go take a look at the video number 9 in the description. Now, the preview window. Is it better to use it in better quality or better performance? I personally use it in better quality. In better performance mode, the image will look not so good. But don't worry, this has absolutely no effect on your final result. This is only for the preview of your timeline. Next point, saving your project. Well, this is a very good point about Final Cut. You don't ever need to save. No, because everything is saved in real time. If Final Cut crash, yes, it happens sometime. But when I say sometimes, it's not like every 30 minutes like with Adobe Premiere. No, it's really sometime. Actually, when was the last time? I don't even remember. I would say it's about 5 times a year. For a video editor just like me that produce between 800 and 1000 video every year on a 6 years old computer. And when it do crash, the worst case scenario you can have is that you will have lost your very last manipulation. Now, if you made a mistake and want to return in the past, you can still open a library from a backup. Those backups are made automatically from time to time, and your save file is actually the library that you created at the beginning. Chapter number 3, create a project.
And when I say a new project, this means that it's your video you're about to work on. So earlier we saw that we have some libraries over here on the left, but when I talk about a project, the projects are inside the libraries. So actually I'm working on that one, which is the video you're looking at right now. So it's Final Cut Pro tutorial, first steps for beginners. Well, the project is over here. That's the video you're looking at just right now. So now if I want to create a new project, I will go on File, New Project. And remember that shortcut over here, that's Command N for new. And I'm gonna hit that. And here we're gonna have to input some settings for that project.
Be organized. Give a name to the project. Select the event, if needed. That could be useful for a library with multiple projects in it. For example, I've got this library for one of my customers, and inside the library there is many events. So usually when that customer asks me for a new job, I have to make several videos. So I create an event for those videos. This way, few months or years later, when I want to come back to a project, it's easier to find. Timecode. If you don't know what this is, you probably don't need it. I personally never use it on Final Cut, so I don't have much to say about it. Choose the video resolution. Most common is 1080p, 4K, or vertical. For this, you should choose the video resolution you used on your camera. If you need advice on this topic, please see the video number 2 in the description. Then you will need to choose the frame rate. This one you really need to make sure it matches the one of the videos you will import. I don't care if you film in 24, 25, 30 or 60 frames per second, that's totally up to you. But just make sure you stick to it. If you need advice on this topic, please see the video number 3 in the description. Next, rendering. Apple ProRes is a video codec that creates huge file size, but is very easy to read for your computer. Most of the video files you will import on your timeline, like H.264 for example, are designed to be shared, not to be edited. So when you will do your rendering, and we will come back on this later, Final Cut will create an Apple ProRes version of that video. Basically, this doesn't change anything to the final result. I encourage you to take Apple ProRes 422 LT as it's the lightest codec available. You can see the video number 4 to know more about that topic. Then, the audio. If you're new into video editing, probably that stereo will be your pick. Stereo means 2 channels, left and right. Otherwise, you can go to surround to add more sound channels. The 48 kHz sample rate is probably fine for you, but if your device records at a higher rate, you might want to increase to not lose any quality of what you have already recorded.
Finally, we can end this by hitting the OK button, and the project is now created. You can see here the project potato is just right here. If I double click on it, I can start working on it.
We now have reached chapter 4, And let's jump on the computer so I can explain you how the Final Cut Pro interface works.
So here we are on my Final Cut Pro project, the one I'm working on right now, the video you're looking at right now, and we're gonna see all the options we have on that interface. But first of all, we're gonna make sure we have the same interface because there's a lot of things you can change on that interface. So to make sure of that, I will ask you to come here on Window and go down to Workspaces and select Default, because if, for example, you are on Color and Effect, you might have something that look like this and it will be totally different. So Window, Workspaces, and Default. You can add many things if you want. You can go here and show in workspace and select what you want to see. You can save a workspace if you have one that you build for your own taste, but personally I only use color and effect and default. So I select that. The first part that we will see is the media box. The media box is that part just over here. What do we find here? There is 3 subsections. There is the first one that we're gonna see just right now, which is the library sidebar. So we already saw that what we have on that left column is the library, and if we hit that arrow, we can see everything that is inside. For that example, the one that I'm working on right now, the Auto 2023, I have on top, like we saw earlier, my project, and under that we've got all the media that I have imported. I didn't put them into that section. As soon as I put something on my timeline lower here, it had it automatically to the project over here. For that kind of project, I don't need to create event or something like this. I just work with my library and all my projects are following each other. Then if we pass to the next subsection, we've got this one in which we can find some stuff that is connected to Final Cut. So there is the iPhoto library. There's nothing here because I don't use iPhoto. You've got iTunes, you've got Apple TV. I don't know exactly what this is, and I don't know why there is stuff inside that, but anyway, I don't use that. The only one that I use is the sound effect over here. Some might be included with your Mac. I don't think there is any sound effect that come with Final Cut, but if you have something like GarageBand or maybe another software from Apple to create music, you might have some effect over here. So everything is inside here. I can select an effect and drag it over here, and it's now on my timeline. Or you can search for, I don't know, police, and you're gonna have everything that is related to police. You can add some effect into that, and if you want to know how to do it, I will link a video in the description if you want to know how to add music inside that section. Now we're gonna pass to the next one. It is the title and effect. You will probably realize that there is a lot more of title than on your Final Cut. It is because I have purchased some of them. The one that come with it by default look like this. You have a lot of really, you don't want to use that kind of stuff. So the only title that I use that come with it is inside bumper opener, and it's the basic title. So it's just a basic title. It's this one over here. I can type something else inside here. I can change the font. I can play with its position. I can play with its size. I can do those kind of things. I can put drop shadow if I want. I can play with the opacity. I can do all those kind of stuff, but that's the only one that I use because I think the other one are very immature. The only other thing that I use is at the very lower section inside solid. and it's the custom solid over here. So if I had that, well, as you can see, it's a black background. So I could take that title and set it over here to got something like this. Or sometimes I will just use it to create a blank to let me remember that I have something to add, just like here. You see I have my stuff and boom, there is that black bar. So like that, I'm sure to remember that I have something to put. Or there's a ton of use of that. And also if you click on it, you can change the color. So that's the custom solid background. Otherwise, the background that come with it, with Final Cut, look terrible. They look like this. You will never use that. Please don't use that. Don't use that. It looks terrible. If you want to have great background, title, or effect, I will link a video in the description. And with that, you will see all the effect that I use, all the title that I use, and you'll be able to purchase it too if you want. So that was for the media box. And the next part is the viewer bar. So basically the viewer bar is that one, the one where you see your project when you're moving on the timeline. So there's a couple of things that you can do over here. First one that we're gonna see is inside here. You see here the percentage. I always set it to fit when I'm working on my timeline and I wanna see what's happening. But sometime you might want to switch to 25 or 12.5%. That could be if, I don't know, there is that title that I put over here, that move over there. If I want to get it back, I can take it and put it back. That is just an example, but there's a lot of situation where you need to put your screen smaller so you can see what is around. Otherwise, you can also increase it up to 600% if you need to do something very precise, and you can move on that frame using that. You see that little red square, so you can move that square to any corner of the frame. And well, if you have something very precise to do, that's the way to do. So I'm gonna set it back to fit. And then you got here inside view, you can add a show title action save zone. This one. What is the use of that? Let's say that I take that title one more time here, and I want to put it at this place. Well, if you are working for a project on web, well, that may be fine. I'll set it on the other side because it's white on white. That look great. That's all right. But the use of that is that if you're doing something for TV, it says that it's not safe because as soon as you go the other side of that green bar, it is for sure that you won't see it on a TV because a TV always crop that frame outside and may even go even further. So if you're going on TV, you must go there. Might look fine actually, but if I remove that frame, it look terrible for the web. So web, TV, different kind of project. And you also got that show title, show horizon, like that. Might be helpful for something. Well, the option is there. And finally, we've got the most important section. It's the inspector. The inspector is a bit like the menu bar of the Mac. This means that actually I'm on Final Cut. If I go on the menu bar, I've got all the option of Final Cut. But if I go on Spotify, here I've got all the option of Spotify. And when I come back to Final Cut, I've got all the option of Final Cut. So the inspector will always show you the option of what you have selected. Actually, there's nothing selected, but I'm on that frame, and that frame represent that clip. So we've got the option of the clip. If I go over here, it's still a clip, but if I select the title, I've got the option of the title. If I go here and I select the project, I've got the option of the project. So if I select, this clip, actually I'm gonna do it on another project because I don't want to ruin the one I'm working on right now. So I have that frame, and there's some subsection of the menu bar. So the first one is the video inspector. Here I can play with the blend mode. Let's say that I put something over that and I play with the blend mode. Well, as you can see, it blend. There's different kind of blend, but that's what it does. And then what do we have? We've got the opacity, so we can play with the opacity. Actually, it's just going dark because there is nothing under it. But if I take a title and I play with its opacity here, opacity, well, you see it play with the opacity. You can play with the position of the frame, you can play with its rotation, you can play with the scale, you can play, you can crop it from the left, from the right, the top, the bottom. You can also distort your clip if you want to do it. I never use that, but you can do it. And then we go to the color inspector. Here, when you go inside that part, you can go in Window, Workspace, and go on Color and Effect. And remember those shortcuts if you want to change it very quickly. So by having this here, I've got that graph, those graphs that help me to play with the exposure if I want to balance it right. I've got the general exposure, so that changed everything. That one only changed the darker part, that one changed the middle part, and that one changed the brighter part. You can play with the saturation, and it's the same principle with those dots on the left. And you can also play with the color. You can also change of kind of board. You've got a color wheel, and this one let you play, well, like that with the mid-tone. That was the word I was looking for before. You can play with the temperature, you can play with the tint. So that's another feature. And you can also play with curves and just play with that. You're gonna find a lot of stuff. Then we also got the audio inspector. This one you can play with the volume. If you had an effect, so if I had that limiter over here, you can see that my limiter go here, and I can play with the gain and all the effect that come with the limiter. It's the same principle for the video. If you had an effect, so let's say that I had a blur, a Gaussian blur over here, I will see that Gaussian blur get here, and I can play with the effect over here. I will delete it. The last option will be that one, which is the info. So it's the info inspector, and we can see a couple of things about that clip. If I go back to my default workspace, Command A, that's my shortcut on my keyboard. If I select the project, I can see the detail of the project, and I can also go on modify to modify the frame rate or the resolution. Those kind of things can be changed here. So very important part, the inspector. Remember, it's like the menu bar of Final Cut. If you're looking to modify something, it's probably in the inspector.
Oh, and that's not it for the inspector. As we have just saw, there's those 4 options, but you might see some other one in some situation. For example, if I take that title and I set it just right here, well, in the inspector, we now have 2 other options. The first one is this one, the title inspector, and this one we will find a lot of option about that title to edit that title. We can talk about the text, the size, the position of it. Sometimes there is animation options. There is a lot of options. And the other one is very text specific. In fact, it's the text inspector. So on that one, if you select a text,
You can modify it, you can change the font, the size, the alignment, the baseline, you can set it to all caps, those kind of options. You can also play with the position, the rotation, the scale, and if you go at the very bottom, you can add drop shadow, glow, outline, those kind of things. There's a lot of options inside that too. And it's not impossible that you may find some other inspector in some situation with other kind of stuff. So if you need to modify something, never forget to take a look at the inspector. It's probably there.
And we have reached chapter 5, the timeline. And this is where all the magic happens. This is where you drop all your clip and do your cut and mix everything. So let's have a quick overview of all the tools you have on that timeline.
So here we are on the timeline. Well, the timeline is actually this part. This is where you drop all your stuff, and there's a lot of tools related to it, so we're gonna see them one by one. The first one is one that I don't use very much. It's the index. It's just right here on the left. When you hit it, you can see everything that is on the timeline, but as a list. There is something that is called the skimming tools, which is that line over here. That's the skimming tool, and it's represented right over here with that line just right there. But if I click on another clip, just like here, it will select it on the timeline so I can see where I am, and I can also do a search to find something more easily than just scrolling like this on the timeline. So this is the index. Then we're gonna move a little bit on the right. There is 2 arrows, one over here and one over here. Those arrows are made to move from a project to another. So if, for example, I'm actually on the French version of the video you are looking at right now, just right here, and if I go to the English version that I didn't start it yet, right here, and I move to another project that is already done, just like that, I can move back to the previous project just with that, go back in timeline history, like that, and go back to the other one I was at the beginning by pressing the left arrow again. I can come back to the next one, or the previous, or whatever, you understand. You can move from a project to another using those 2 arrows. Very useful when you work on more than one project at the same time, or maybe if you just want to go grab something, an effect you already created on another one, so you go look for that other one, you go on it, and I wanted to take that back and copy it, and then I could go back down and search my project, but I can just go back with that arrow and paste my effect just right here. So that's the way to go quicker. And then we're gonna move a little bit on the right over here, where we can find the skimming tool. The skimming tool is actually that orange bar that you see following my mice. So if I deactivate it, well, I don't have it anymore. I can move from a place to another if I click with the mice, but it doesn't follow anymore. Very useful tool. I think I leave it enabled all the time. The other one next to it is the audio skimming tool. It's the same thing. Well, it's linked to that other one, because if this one is disabled, you can see that it's a bit grayed out, but it's still a little blue. It's confusing, but you see, it follow it. So when this is enabled, we can't hear it actually because I mute my speaker, but we would hear yeah, those kind of sound when I'm moving. And the reason why I keep it enabled is because when I use the left and right arrow to move on the timeline, I like to hear the sound of it because I use it very often to make my cut. The next one, I'm gonna move to that part of the clip because there is few layer over here. As you can see, there is 3 layers of video, but there's also 3 layers of audio. There is my voice and there is 2 sound effect. And if I would like to just play it and only hear my voice because I get disturbed with the sound effect, well, I could use that button over here to isolate that part so we can still see all the video layers, but now I can only hear that clip. You can also use the shortcut Option S to use that feature. So if I move somewhere else and I want to isolate that section, I can do it. Actually, there was 4 layers because there's the music down there also. So this is for the audio isolation. The next one is the snapping tool. It's to enable or disable the magnet. What is the magnet? Let's say that I put my skimming tool right over here and I go here to take, I don't know, maybe that effect. When I will move it in the direction of the skimming tool, you will see that at some point it will snap to it. See, snap. And when I move it away, de-snap, there's always that distance. There is that gap where I can't go. It will always snap to the skimming tool. And it's the same principle. If I move on the left, you will see when I will reach that joint between those 2 clips, it will snap to it. Snap, 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 snap. It will always try to snap on something. If I disable it, well, I get rid of that effect. I can move exactly wherever I want. Sometimes the snapping tool might be not great, but I think most of the time it's a great thing because you move with the skimming tools exactly where you want, and then you can bring your media and snap it to it. I like to use it. That's the way I work. Then here you can play with your interface. There's a zoom out and a zoom in. I absolutely never use that because when I'm on the timeline, I use Command plus and Command minus. I think it goes better. But you can play with the style. So if you only want to have the audio or much more audio and a little bit of the video, well, you can play with it. Or if you want to be easy on your computer, you can have absolutely nothing. I personally use that one, and you can play with the size of the video with that one over here. The one right there, well, I never use them. Right next to it, there is the Effect tab. When we go inside here, there is some things that are useful and some that are not. If, for example, I go in blur, I think the Gaussian blur is kind of great. And you can play with the amount over here. So that is something that is built in inside Final Cut. Great tool, great tool. There's also the mask and keying. So if I bring a draw mask, I could create a mask just like that and play with it as I want. Or I have that graduated mask that is also great. The use of it is to usually put something under. It's just an example. There's something that are great. There are other things that I don't think those things are very useful. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think this is very useful. So you have those kind of things that you are just like, why? And you can purchase some. On the top you have the video effect, and at the bottom you have the audio effect. And when we move on the right over here, you've got the transition effect. And for those one, most of them look very, very terrible. Very terrible. The only one that come with it that I use is the cross dissolve. So, well, it's a cross dissolve. It's an effect just like that, but you can also use it by using the shortcut Command T for a transition, and it creates that cross dissolve transition. But again, if you want great one, there's some that you can purchase, and I made a video with the best one that I use all the time. It's in the description. Let's just do a quick comeback on the effect tab at the bottom. I said that there was the audio. Again, it's the same principle. Some are great, some are not. The one that I use the most, I would say it's in levels, and you've got limiter. And if you have the Logic software, you will have an even better one. It's the limiter over here. You just take it, you drag it on your clip, and it will be inside the speaker. We hear the audio inspector. and you can see the limiter is here, and you can play with it. I already had one. Anyway, let's shut that down and go back to the middle. Here we have 3 other features. The first one is the cropping tool. You can use the trim. I don't know what's really the use of it, because, well, when it's done, it just create that. I just never go that way. I go into the video editor, the video inspector, and I use the crop just like that instead of going inside that menu. There is the magic. Oh no, I'm not done. There's some other things here. The crop over here lets you crop like that. That neither I don't use it. I prefer to go in the video inspector, do a scale in, and I can also move the position if I need. That's the way I do it. But the last one, I do use it. There's the can burns, and this one creates a starting point and an ending point. And you can also move that window as you wish. Now, if I play that, that will create that zoom out effect. Actually, you can see there's an acceleration and a deceleration. It's because if I go back inside here and hit the right click of my mouse, there, as you can see, there is an easy in and easy out. I can use it also linear, and it would go that way. So that's the feature that I use. Now, if I want to disable that, I would go on trim and hit done, and that's it. So that's for the cropping tool. Then you got the magic wand. Let's select something. This one, you can use it to automatically balance your color, match color between that clip and another one, enhance the audio, but it's not so magical. The result is not so great, so I just never use it. And finally, here you've got the retiming tool, useful to slow down your clip, the one that is selected, make a hole, use the blade speed, we're gonna see that. But I never reach it over here. I've just learned the shortcut over here. And what I do if I want to retime something is that I will use Command R for retime, and I can use that little part right over here to slow it down or accelerate it. Otherwise, I can hit that arrow over here and go into custom. From here, I can reverse the clip or go back to forward, or choose a very precise rate, or choose the duration that I want that clip to last. There was also the retiming blade. Was that the name? Blade speed. As you can see, it's Shift B for blade. So Shift B will create that little incision inside the clip, and I can slow down that part or accelerate it also. And the great part is an accelerating area. So it will play 77 and then gradually upgrade to 100 inside that correct area. So that's another great tool. Then you can see a couple of timers. This one is actually where we are on the timeline. So as you can see, where when I move with the skimming tools, the time change. Then we've got that one, which is the total time of this project. So the very last frame is at 48 minutes, 23 seconds, and 21 frame. And if I select something, what I have here is that frame that lasts 2 seconds and 15 frame. That's another way to express thing. And if I select some click, I can now know that this does 10 seconds and 1 frame. So that was a lot of tools that we have see inside that timeline, and that makes a lot of shortcut to learn.
I highly recommend that each time you need to go in that menu and reach something, you learn that famous shortcut so that next time you can access it more quickly. I use my mice the least possible because I learned the shortcuts of everything I use. If you want to get used to it more quickly, you can add a cover on your keyboard with all the shortcuts on it. I don't have anyone to recommend because I did not use one since a while, but I left you a link in the description if you want one. And we have reached chapter number 6. Let's do some basic editing. The first thing to understand is that it's not all the effect that you put on your timeline that make a good edit. It's your storyline. A movie almost never have transition. They do cut and sometimes fade. That's it. If you want to look professional, just do cuts most of the time and you're already way beyond real amateurs. The second thing will be to just put all of your footage on the timeline. I personally never really use the Final Cut library because I think it's poorly made. It's really terrible. I'm more organized inside my folders in Finder. So I just pick everything from there, drop it on the timeline, and arrange it. Once everything is in the right order, we come to the part 3, and it's to cut out everything you don't want. Remove the useless stuff. For example, when I come down to read my script right here, and cut hesitation to make it more concise, First short, remove the useless stuff. Cut out everything you don't want. Remove the useless stuff. Cut hesitation to make it more concise. First shortcut to learn. Command B for blade. So with this one, you just move your skimming tools where you want to do your cut. You can also move with the left and right arrow, and you use Command B to make a cut. Then you can remove all the unwanted media. For this, you can use the shortcut Command X, like X-ray, and that delete the selected files. You can also use the backspace, or you can also use the trimming tool. To change the order, just move it between the other clip. You can also set it over. There's no limit of how many layers you can stack. Well, maybe there is one, but good luck to reach it. If you need to fill something, you can use the custom solid generator. Basically, it's a black background that you can change for any other color if needed. One very important thing to understand about Final Cut is that everything is based on the central line and that this one can never be empty. This means that if you remove an element, the whole created will automatically be filled by what was following, and that if you had something, the following will be pushed further. Also, as we saw earlier, you can add media over the main line. Those media will automatically be linked to the main line. The attach point is always made by the very first frame of the upper media to wherever it is on the main line. So if you had something on the timeline that make move the media on the main line, everything that is attached to it will move with it. And it's exactly the same principle for music and sound effects that are under the main line. This method of editing seems to annoy a lot of newer Final Cut Pro editor, as it's something pretty unique to that software. In most video editing software, each line is usually independent. Personally, I think it's very well made, once you get used to it. One very important thing to understand from that system is that attach point can be changed. For example, when I do those tutorial video, the background music that you hear just right now is actually attached to the very last clip at the end, as it's the only one I keep from a video to another. As my ending is always the same, I never need to readjust it. In fact, the only thing I adjust is the length of the audio track to match with the beginning. To change the attachment point, you must shorten the clip from the beginning using the trimming tool, and you will see the linked point move to the newest beginning point. Once done, you can put back the clip to the length you want, and the attachment point will remain at the same place. Next point, if you need help to cut your narrative because you did some retake or you just want to cut some hesitation, I made a complete video about this, and it's the video number 5 in the description. Now let's jump on some tips to help you on your edit. Zoom in and zoom out with command plus and command minus. Move from left to right with shift and the roller on your mice, or by holding H for hand on your keyboard and dragging with the mice. The trim position on side and in the middle with T for trim. You can move from a clip to another with the up and down arrow. Moving frame by frame with left and right arrow. Play pause can be done with the spacebar. You can also pause with kilo. You can play with Lima. Play faster by pressing it again and again. Play reverse with Juliet and faster by pressing it again. Of course, you will probably need command Zulu very often to undo, and note that command shift Zulu will do a redo. We will push video editing way beyond in the advanced video, but already with all I gave you yet, we could get to something that could be ready for exporting. And this is exactly what we are gonna see in the next chapter, exporting a project. Exporting the project means that we take everything you did on your timeline and we convert it to a video file so you can share it with anybody. Reach File, Share, and Export File. Now remember that shortcut. It's Command E for export. Actually, mine is different because I changed it. If you want to know how, I made a video about that. It's not a Final Cut settings, it's a general Mac settings. I explain how to do it in the video number 6 in the description. Now, let's see those export settings.
So this is the window on which we're going to do the export of the video. The export is done in 3 phases. The first one is the info, just right here. So on this page, we're able to change the name of the file. We can do that a bit further, but that's somewhere we can do it. We can also change the description, the name of the creator, and add some tags, but I think this is quite useless. The second part will be to go on the settings page. On this one, we are able to choose the format. As you can see, the last project that I did export, I only export the audio of it. You can choose between audio only, video only, or video and audio. The other one, just forget about it. Most of the time you will probably export video and audio, so I'm gonna pick that one. And then we are able to choose the format. Actually, it's on Apple ProRes 422. All of those Apple ProRes are better format to export to another video editor because you will lose not much quality of video or anything. And you can go to H264 if you want to share it to pretty much anybody. I'm gonna pick that one right now, but if you want to have more detail, like I said a bit previously in the video, you can take a look at the video number 4 in the description. You can see the difference in size of H264 that will make that video of 1 hour and 5 seconds and 19 frame a 31.16 gigabyte file. But if I go to Apple ProRes LT, for example, the lightest one, we go up to 182 gigabyte. And if I pick the heaviest one, we go up to 900 gigabytes. So let's go on H264. Then we can go to the next step, which is roles. And from here, you can see what you will export as a file. So you see, this is one huge file that will contain a single video track and a single audio track. That means that if we take a look at the timeline, you can see there is that layer of me speaking, and that overhead, there is that keyboard, and that overhead, there is 4 title, and all of them will now be in a single track. This means that if you want to change something, a title or anything, you're stuck with it. The title is on the same layer than the rest. It's one video file. And it goes for the same thing for the audio track. As you can see here, in blue, that's me speaking. In gray, that's the audio effect. And in green, that's my music background. And they will all be in a single track. This means that if someday you want to pick that project, you don't have the Final Cut file anymore, and you want to do a translation from English to French, for example, well, you can't just remove the English audio because it is fixed with the effect and the music. You will remove everything. So there's a solution for this. If you want to keep the track separately, the audio track, you can go in multi-track QuickTime Movie. And this will create one file with one video track, but as you can see, 3 separate audio track. So eventually you should be able to delete that audio track, the dialogue one, and replace it with a new narration by keeping all the effect and the music at the very same place. There's another option that I never tried. You can export as separate files. So that looks like to be 5 files, one for your titles, one for your video, and one for dialogue, all effect, and all music. There's something I should say about the multi-track QuickTime Movie. If you try to export something like this to YouTube, doesn't like it, you will have no error message, but you will only have the video track and the first audio track. So in that example, I would lose all the effect and all the music. So what I do usually is that I export it as a regular QuickTime Movie, just like that. And once that's done, you go in settings, you export audio only, and in the role here, I will select audio only as separate files, just like that. So you pick the configuration you need, and after that, you hit next, and you choose where you want to save it. As you see, change the name. That's the name I gave to that project, but I can change it again. Select where you want to save it, hit save, and let your computer work for you.
Then, wait for your computer to process everything. And we're done. This process can be very long even for a very powerful computer. It all depends on the length, the resolution, and the complexity of your project. By the way, by default, you should end up with a file with a .mov extension. If you want to share it with somebody on Windows, he might not be able to read it. If this happens, just tell him to rename the extension from .mov to .mp4 and it should be just fine. Now, if you want to push the exporting to the next level, I made a video about how to use Compressor, which is another software that is sold separately, but it's very linked to Final Cut. And it's the video number 7 in the description. So, there we are. If you are at your first step in video editing, I think it's already a lot for today. You know how to import your media in Final Cut, do a little bit of editing, and export your project. Go outside, film a short film, and do a bit of editing to get used to the software. And remember, usually the simpler your project is, the better. And once you feel more comfortable with Final Cut, come back and take a look at the part 2 of that video. In this one, I will really deep dive in other very important topic of video editing. I will talk about audio mixing, music editing, adding titles, transition, color correction, masking, and much more. So, see you there. Take care and have fun editing.